Welcome to Sharing Hope. I'm your host, Jamie George, and I'm with the illustrious Mr. Steve Fee. A few things about Steve. Steve was part of the Passion Worship movement, was nominated, you won a couple doves from that whole world, right? Nominated for New Artist of the Year back in 2009. The guy has been a prolific songwriter. Had cuts with Aaron Shust and Carrollton. How do you say it's a town in Texas, isn't it?
Yeah, it's Carrollton, yeah.
Carrollton, I got it right. Good. Josh Wilson.
Yeah,
He's had TV placements on Duck Dynasty, Grey's Anatomy, Private Practice, How to Get Away with Murder. Steve was recently, not too long ago, featured on NBC's reality show Songland twice, right? Were you on there twice? Is that right?
I performed one time, and then another song of mine was sung on there that I had written with a buddy.
That's right. And your song was runner-up, the song Same Blood, and recorded by Ella Black, right?
Yep.
And featured on NBC's Today Show and Fox's The Resident. Steve, welcome. Great to have you with us, my friend.
Dude, it's so good to see you and so good to be here.
Man, I miss seeing you. So it was nice just catching up for a few seconds before we started this thing. And man, you inspire me because for a number of reasons, your talent, obviously, but your ability to strip back so much of the pretense of the world, your authenticity, and the way you show up in the world in such a raw way inspires me, brother. It has since I met you. I'm so grateful for. There's you. It may not feel like this to you, but I'm going to say this. It feels like you have a clarity about you in the midst of uncertainty, and all the darkness and all the struggle and all the questions. There's this sense of purpose and direction that you're the kind of guy that I'm like, if that dude's leading, I'll follow. And I just want to say to you off the top, I love that about you. I appreciate that about you, and just grateful you take some time to hang out.
That sounds wonderful. Yeah, I want to believe that more about myself. That's wonderful to hear you say. And that's the guy I want to be. That version of Stevie that you just described. That's a great dude.
I'm just telling you, I think maybe, I sometimes see it in people before they see it about themselves. And I really do. Like, there's an inner strength about you that's amazing. So let's start with this. How are you making it through the quarantine? What's happening? How are you doing? Let's do a quick check.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, how we're doing through the quarantine, literally based on what 30-second span you asked us, because it's like, it's all over the map, man. Like, for me emotionally, it's in stark contrast to your description of me just mere minutes ago. It's been super unsettling, and there's moments where I'm just completely uncertain of everything. And then there's other moments that I'm like, we're going to be fine. There's goodness to be soaked in from this whole imposed thing that we're all going through. And I've been shocked at my inability to stay in that mindset. Like, all of a sudden I'm ripped out of it because of one thing just hits me sideways. And then it's like, hey, it's still gonna be fine. There's all these problems, and we can just count our problems, but it's gonna be fine. So we're doing okay, man. I've got two boys. Their mom lives a couple states away. Well, it's actually in North Carolina, one state away, but it feels like 4. And so that's been a little hectic, but the times together have been really, really good. So we're here in Franklin most of the time. And it's just a new normal, figuring out okay, I'm usually used to making music with people, and and Zoom and FaceTime and Google Hangouts that don't really get that close to that. I mean, it's at least something. I'm grateful for it.
But it's not the same of being in the room with someone.
It's not. The energy isn't.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's I love, I've created the writing room in this studio to just be vibe, and it's like, womp, womp, womp. There's no vibe on the iPad, So, but it's still possible, and there's still art to be made and things compelling songs that can be created.
But people aren't crazy. Like when you were describing, like there are moments like, boom, locked in, let's go, we're gonna be fine, clear. And then it doesn't take much. Oh my gosh, you get knocked right off. Like I've had that. Like we're not crazy.
Yeah.
Like that. I'm not alone.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, even in the context of trying to write a song, and you feel like, hey, this call is actually working, and then it just something happens, whether it's technological or just you take a wrong turn, and it's just hard to kind of get back, in the flow. But there's work stuff, financial stuff, but it's gonna be okay. Like I just keep saying, like I just believe it's gonna be okay, and so keep doing whatever you feel like you're supposed to be doing today. I even tell songwriters, and a few outlets that I have to coach songwriters is be open-handed to write whatever song you're supposed to write today. You may want to write a song for this certain artist or for this TV show or for this ad spot or whatever, but like if that's not what's kind of bubbling in your heart today and like coming out, like export what's supposed to be exported, because there's always something to export. And so that's been kind of a lesson for me during this whole time, is like, okay, what am I supposed to do today? What am I supposed to write music? Am I supposed to write words? Am I supposed to do like does it look like for me today in the midst of this ridiculousness to put my hands to something and say, I believe I was created today for this. And it doesn't always happen as from a motivational level, but when it does, that's when I'm most like at peace and settled in the midst of all this weirdness.
I love what you're saying there about the supposed to, because it removes the supposed to, right? Like the supposed to is almost like kind of a weird way of like a judgment of like, I guess I'm supposed to follow some pattern, some thing, some whatever. But when you just said that, I mean, it really struck me creatively. This actually is forcing us to do the work to wake up in the morning and go, I got to be present to what I'm feeling right now.
Right. And for sometimes for music makers, it's weird because our schedules are so flux. And so like, it can kind of be whatever, it's a very, oftentimes unstructured thing. Until it gets super structured to where like you have to like create the song and mix the song and do all the edits, and like that's and for me, that's not my favorite part of doing the like engaging in the process of singing a song through to the end. I love when other people do that, but
right.
There's no one else here now, so I'm doing that at a, I would say confidently, a subpar level. But it's been it's been cool to be like, okay, what is today, and what does it look like for me to export, even if it's not amazing art, just export it to make room for more.
There might be something behind it. Like,
yes.
maybe I just get out what's on top because there's something behind.
Yes.
Hey, would you say that creatively? Like, if you're just if you write poems, if you like to create you're a culinary person, you want to make a new dish, it really is a creative truth, right?
Right. Well, totally. I talked to new songwriters like, I want one of my speed bumps to fully engaging in the songwriting process is I don't want to write bad songs. It's like, well, welcome to being a song. Like, write the worst songs possible and just get them over with.
Yeah.
Right. And like learn from them. Right. So like now I know what it looks like for me to wake up in the morning and write a really crummy song. So let's try to dodge that the next time. And so, it's just the whole exhaling of what's inside. And sometimes there's just junk that's going to come out as junk that just is really good that it's out. And someone says, what's your favorite song you've ever written? And my answer is always the next one. So that's the model we're working on nowadays.
Man, so good. So good. I was just on the phone with my son, who's a songwriter, and I'm thinking, I'm going to tell him, make sure you watch this interview with Steve, because he needs to hear that. He's stuck, and he's a bit of a perfectionist, so he wants to write the right thing. Yeah. And you're right, man. That's such great direction creatively. All right, so
I'll tell you, just not to interrupt, but just so I don't skip over, because I might forget. See, one of the things that's been pretty monumental for my wife Stephanie and I during this time has just been like, it's interesting because like things like this quarantine just illuminate what's already there to a higher degree. You know what I mean? So like we've we've been recently pretty vigilant at sitting down and looking each other in the eyes and saying, okay, this is my struggle with you and with me. And it's hard in the pace of everyday life. It's easy to dodge and just kind of do the thing, right? Like come home and get something to eat and like just do all the things that don't necessarily cause the tension to flare. And that's just not as possible during the last 2 months, right? And so it's been great, just like taking the junk out of our hearts and putting it on the table and turning the light on and going, that's what's in there. And I'm not always okay with you knowing that. I should be, because that's marriage, right? But it's undergoing the process to be okay with being honest about what's inside of our hearts toward each other.
How it's incredibly vulnerable.
Yes, it's also terrifying, but it's really helpful, and it's been helpful for us.
How have you? Why the value to be that vulnerable, and how have you learned to be that way with one another?
The why is that we've had this same handful of just relational issues over the last season of life, and we both go to a therapist. Sometimes we go together, separate. And she gave us a book to kind of work through that causes you and teaches you to kind of dive deep and ask questions you wouldn't normally ask. And we just decided to do the book, to actually do our homework.
We're going to do the homework, right?
Yeah, while we're in timeout for taking it home. So we did. And so that's been, and there's some very foundational issues that we're trying to be together on that we know that we're not. And so it's helped. It's just it is terrifying. It's hard. It's like learning a completely new hard skill, because there's been the arc of my life has taught me to do that in other ways, and not necessarily to be vigilant about it in the context of marriage, which is harder than any other context, to be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's one of the cool things about it is it's okay. We've discovered it's okay to leave the conversation not agreeing on something, but having a mutual love for each other, saying, I love you, and I'm going to choose to trust that you're for me. And we don't agree, but I still choose to trust you're for me. That, for me, to be honest, has been really hard in my life to really believe that people are for me, right? And so some of those same issues, rear their head in marriage, and it's like, no, I need to believe that you're for me, and there's plenty of evidence that you are. But I'm just, in this particular thing, I'm just not choosing to see it, and it's caused us both to lean toward each other, even when we don't agree.
Are you able to have moments afterwards, like sitting together watching a movie or sitting around at the dinner table or whatever afterwards, where knowing the disagreement is hanging out there, you're okay, you can be with each other, and because of that trust?
Totally. And it's just so crazy how just one little thing can change the temperature of the conversation. Like it was one of our first times that we ended the conversation because we were both kind of exhausted of having the conversation, and we just and exhausted because we've been at it for a while,
right?
And it's not a screaming match. It's not but it's certainly disagreement and tension. And we decided that it was probably a good place to leave it and start watching a show or whatever. We were watching something on the couch, and she just pressed pause and looked at me and said, "Thank you for having that conversation." That meant so much. I would rather do that, even if we don't agree, than do anything else that we could have done tonight, watch a movie or blah, blah, blah. Because I'd rather do that. That's a great night for me.
Wow.
Jamie, I didn't never know that.
Yeah.
I never knew that about my life. Right.
Yeah.
And so she's like that, even though that was, we didn't tie it up in a bow, that was so life-giving. And I feel so much more connected to you now. Again, in the framework of disagreement, which is crazy, but in the framework of us still not agreeing, I feel so more connected to you now than I did this afternoon.
One of the things I always say to my clients, which I got this from somebody else, but intimacy is intimacy. And to me, that's what you're describing. Like there's a moment where you're just going, hey, this is who I am. It's super risky to say it. I feel really exposed, but there's even in that disagreement, there's this beautiful connection. That's what you're describing. Wow. And she's going, I'll take the tension because I'm getting to know you.
Yes. It's kind of a brave new world for us. It's been good. It's been good.
Hard.
And
good.
Yeah. And I'd recommend it to everybody during quarantine. It's great. You're going to love it. You are going to love it.
And it does help that you have a guide, right? There is something about having a third party when you get stuck and when, to go, hey, I'm having, this is great. My partner in life, my companion has just exposed this or shown this or whatever, but we're stuck. There's something about having that counselor, therapist, coach, friend who's able to kind of look in and go, this is what she's saying. That having that is super helpful.
Yeah. I mean, it was just our therapist was like, I can see that you guys love each other extraordinarily. And you have problems trusting each other, like trusting that there's the best interest on the other side. And
but that alone, having somebody go, I can tell you love each other. You're like, oh, good.
Yeah. Like
I thought I did.
Can. Hey, babe, she can tell. Tell her I love her, please. Will you? That's what you wanted. But and that's kind of that. Those golden nuggets are what we're trying to dig for. Wow. For us to like be able to hold those in our own hands and be like, yeah, I believe that. I see it.
Well, bravo, my friend. I mean, it's a lot of work. And on the other side, Angie and I have been married to be 28 years this summer. And a little our story. We've done some heavy lifting. And people are like, how many years you were married? We're like, it feels like we really earned some of those years,
Totally.
Yeah, but if you don't do the work at some point, right? You sweep it underneath, it becomes resentment, and it's just going to show up later on.
Yeah, it's going to be communicated somehow.
Yeah.
So how about let's control how it's communicated and let's learn how to do it, right? Instead of just waiting until it just happens.
Yeah.
And then you're cleaning up that mess as well.
And there's less mystery when it's less passive. Direct is way better than passive because, man, that passive, you're like, what did you mean?
Yeah, and what this affords us is like, I don't know, like you kind of know it's coming. Like if you need to run and put the catcher's gear on real quick just to kind of brace yourself for whatever might be headed your way. So it's at least it's a environment that's like created intentionally for, hey, this potentially could not be pleasant for either of us, but we're committed to it.
Yeah.
But it was just a game changer when she was just like, hey, thank you for that. And I was like, no clue it meant that much.
Wow. Gosh, it's so beautiful. Yeah. So I've asked everybody, and this is so good, but I love asking this question because we're all struggling with it. We're all dealing with uncertainty at some level. Could you take us to a piece in your story where you dealt with uncertainty and kind of how did you get through it and how are you different because of it?
Never happened.
The good news is it's been such a walk in the park.
It's just been, it's been so easy. There's, so many, for me, it's hard to not go to the biggest thing that I feel like just changed my life. I mean, mine was self-imposed uncertainty. I'd made some decisions that totally wrecked my marriage. Stephanie, who I'm married to now, is my second marriage. And this is back in 2010. And as I was a lead singer of a Christian worship band, and really doing pretty great, in the midst of having a number one single on the radio, in the midst of being on a great tour, I had to confess that I made some decisions outside my marriage that weren't great decisions. And everything came to a screeching halt. The career, the marriage, any sort of momentum, any sort of belief in myself that I was an okay human. And just everything changed. There was, again, it's weird. It's like this crazy paradox, but it's like, even in the midst of confessing the worst of the worst and having to deal, like what I said before, like what was inside my heart, and put it on the table and turn the light on and say, this is what I just confessed to, and this is what I've done. There was this extraordinary freedom as well, because the secret was out. But at the same time, it's I was uncertain that that I would ever write songs about the Lord again. I was uncertain that I'd ever sing songs about the Lord again. I thought life was just over. My wife at that point, several months later, decided that she wanted a divorce, and she filed for that and moved from Atlanta, where we were, north side of Atlanta, and moved to North Carolina. And we divvied up time with kids and just started I just love being a dad. And I just like another loss and another grief, and another uncertainty of what's that going to look like. And so, yeah, does that qualify?
Yeah, I think so. Good heavens. And you and I've talked a number of times about the challenge, the difficulty, the levels of uncertainty. How has it changed you walking through it? Certainly there's all these aspects of things you still can't control. You're still dealing with things in real time, right? But you show up in the world differently, and you have a hope and a confidence in Christ. There's this confidence in God and a hope in you. Again, that's part of what I say I always admire about you. Or somebody could have been like, I'm done, I'm beat down, but you've come. There's this redemptive aroma around your life, and I think anybody who knows you says that. It's why we like being around you. You discovered something about God through this process.
Yeah, I did. I discovered a lot, and then have to rediscover it too, because I'm just,
it's daily.
I'm just a dumbbell sometimes. I have to reacquaint myself and retell my own story. And I think in that context, a dear friend of mine, who I went to for help when everything kind of just came undone. And he said to me, you're not going to believe, I'm going to tell you something. You're not going to believe me. And you're not supposed to believe me, but I think you will. He said, but at some point, all this is happening that you think is the end of everything. At some point, all it's going to be is a story that you tell, period. That's all it's going to be. And I really believe you can tell a good story, a great story about the goodness of God. And he was right. I didn't believe him until years later, I'm telling the story. And there's another relevant thing in that same time period. About a week later, I was staying with a friend, because I'd kind of just let my wife have her space in the house, and I was sitting in his patio, and he walked out, and then just had this blank look on my face, like I was just looking off in the distance. And he said, "What's going on?" And I said, "I feel like I'm looking at a panoramic view of my life, and everything is burning to the ground." And he goes, "Great." Like, what? He was like, it's just, it needs to happen, man. Like, what if all the things that you built and you like propped up as like your identity and your ego and like the thing that is making you significant and relevant in the world that you created, what if that just all goes away and you discover that without all that, you're still wildly loved by God? And what I learned in that, have learned since then is, and I can look back and see like a really tangible but like severe grace and mercy like that. I'm grateful all that happened, because that guy and that heart wasn't going anywhere good. And it's like, just when your kid's running through traffic and you're like, wait, no, and you'll just stop at all costs, no matter what, to make sure like and it's like, so yeah, one of the things I've learned that has changed me and is changing me, and I hope continues to, is that there's goodness from our Heavenly Father, even when it seems like, oh, this doesn't feel great. But I'm glad to be a different guy. And it took burning, and it took like just pain to get there. And yeah, I think that's one of the.
Would it be fair to say, with everything burned down, because I'm sure there are those listening, I've been through that, who would go, I can relate to the burning down thing, that the soil seems to be most fertile there? Like, it's the greatest opportunity for new growth?
Absolutely. It's, for me, that opportunity was greatest because I was starting over and willing to just be different and wanting to, I still honestly in my heart have trauma around that whole time, because it was just such a big thing. But I think back and go, man, I'm glad that it's good that version of me isn't still just trying to make things happen for all these really insecure and wounded reasons. And so I felt a huge sense of, I get a chance to do this over again. Like do-overs are lovely.
Yeah.
And it wasn't without, pain and consequence, but I love the way you say that about the soil being most fertile there. Yeah, that's
because every day is a do-over, right? Like, I mean, if there really is daily bread for us, every day we wake up, it's like,
yeah, man,
one more choice. You just make the next decision, right?
Yeah. What was interesting is more than interesting, just a massive part of my life is, it was about a year and a half later that I met my wife, who would be my wife, after I got divorced. And she was a single mom. She had gotten divorced, and she was going through cancer treatment with her at that point 5-year-old. And I'm sitting here walking through this like self-imposed tragedy and the fallout, and still just like believing that God's got a purpose, and for me, and experiencing grace. Like and when everything happened, I just didn't like the grace that I had sung about and written about. I didn't feel like it was for me, because I was the villain. It was too much, too messy, too wrong, and like it was work to believe that grace was for me, right? And sadly, she lost her son Creed when he was 7, a year and a half later. And so I'm on this track of self-imposed tragedy. She's on this new track of life-imposed tragedy. And it's not new, because she's been fighting cancer since he was born. So just this struggle, and to see like the same version and the same ridiculous measure of God's grace on both of us was mind-blowing for me, because like I'm sitting there going, no, I don't get the same that she does.
Right. It has to be disproportionately measured, right?
Totally, right? Yeah. She gets like the highest dose. and I'll make do with what you give me, right?
Yes.
Like, and that
I get the generic brand, right? Like, just
right. Yeah. I'm the good RX version of this situation.
Right.
And so it's amazing, man, just to look back going, God, like, I think it's almost like the Lord was waiting for my life to just explode, so he could be like, finally, you get to see that I have all this for you, and you get to be affected by it and see it for what it is, instead of my model before was, if it's good and coming to me, I have to go get it, and I'm going to cultivate it, and I'm going to manufacture it. And to like let all that go, and to receive what I always wanted to feel from the Lord is pretty life-changing. And again, I'm not speaking as someone who wakes up every day and that's just my jam and I'm just perfect at it. But it is, it's one of the things that like kind of rose up and has at times through this quarantine thing. Cause like everything's different and I get super, super anxious and like, but what about the bills and what about songs and what about this thing's canceled? And it's just like, I think back to when I was just sitting on the porch going like, everything's changing. It's so unexpected. And God's going, I know.
Mm.
Yeah, I know. I saw it coming. And guess what? This like there's plenty of me to experience in these moments.
Mm.
And so I think it's one of those things that encourages me just to press in to the Lord in the midst of craziness.
Question.
And yeah,
I get a question for you about. I don't know. I just feel compelled to ask this because the honesty in which you show up in the world. If there's somebody who's listening and says, there's a poet that I love, Mark Nepo, and he says telling our stories is like cleaning out the compost of our souls. That the act of storytelling is actually cleaning something out that tends to get clogged up. That it's therapeutic. There's something about speaking, bringing into the light. There's a healing that happens even in the measure of storytelling. And maybe even our brains, in the nature of telling a story, you're kind of creating meaning around it. But his point is, and I think this is consistent with Jesus' teaching, that there's a healing that happens in bringing things into the light. You could call it confession, right? It's just a form of just sharing what's happened in my story. If there's somebody out there, Steve, who's like, I'd like to have that moment with my spouse. I think I as risky as it feels, I want to share where I'm struggling. Yeah. Any word of encouragement to them, especially if they haven't practiced this very much and it feels really hard or super, super risky. Just any word of encouragement to somebody as we're wrapping up, just to help them.
Yeah, dude. I mean, it is risky and it's hard. And I would say that I wish I could have rewound my story and confessed on my terms. The way my narrative went was it was found out and someone said, you need to do this or I will. Mm. I think the point for me is, had that never have been forced upon me, I don't know that I would have ever confessed it. And I was already so lonely. I felt so isolated because there was always a part of me that I wasn't going to let anybody in. Mm. And it was really a disparaging thought. I would say that there's like, I was blown away. Jamie, I can't describe to you how blown away I was with the feeling of freedom in the midst of saying all this horrible stuff. And that wasn't like a selfish thing, like, well, I'm free from, but it was just this sense of like, why did I just get 1,000 pounds lighter? In the midst of knowing I have to like walk through all this consequence and all this stuff I wouldn't wish on anyone. And I know that's coming, but there's power in saying things that are true. I think that's part of what I need to read more poetry, what that poem was about. But there's freedom in the truth. And it's very likely that your worst fear that you have, if you're saying, I can't tell my spouse this, I strongly doubt those worst fears will be realized. There's power in vulnerability. I've learned that over the last decade. I'm still learning it. Quarantine is fast tracking that process quite well. But there's I'll put it this way. I would rather face what I faced than continue who I was, because it was going to go nowhere good. And that stuff was going to come out just in awful ways anyway.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're debating, like, should I tell my spouse? Something will come out of you that's wildly unpleasant eventually, linked to what's going on now. And like, we just get, like you said, we get a shot to do it right today, you know? Yeah. I don't know, man. I wish that I'd heard people say what I'm saying plenty of times when I was doing all my, and I just didn't pull the trigger on it.
Yeah.
And I desperately wish that I would have.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And yeah, I mean, I've had those moments too. You know, I'm thinking about all the confession in my life. There's been a lot of it. And the resistance to wanting to bring things into the light and trying to understand the propriety of it all. Like, what parts do you share? What parts don't? Who do you share it with? Who don't you?
Right.
You know, navigating all that stuff. But to listen, you know, kind of listen to God, let him guide you and find that space to show up. And
yeah, the principle is that secrets gain power in the dark, and they lose their power when they're exposed to the light.
Yeah.
Period. And there's freedom from it. And there's a dark side victory when you're convinced I have to keep this to myself and not confess it, and everything will be okay. That's not true. It will destroy you from the inside out.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the challenge, the reminder, and for sharing so beautifully your story. Hey, look, if people want to catch up on you and the songwriting, I know you're working on some stuff. If they want to hear kind of what's coming out of Steve Fee's world, where would they go? Where would they check it out?
That's a good question. I'm not great at self-promotion, Jamie. I don't have a website. I should. I've got an Instagram page, which is fine. This season of our life, I would point people if they want to engage in our world. I would love to shoot them over to my wife's world, which she runs a foundation that serves families battling childhood cancer. That's become one of her reasons to walk planet Earth. And so I'll send you a link. You can put it on the page. And it's she runs an organization just called Creed Love. Her son's name is Creed. When his babysitter was teaching him how to sign his name at the end of a letter, she said, "Write Love Creed," and he just flipped it around. He's like, "Creed Love," and so like that's beautiful. That's the name of her foundation. That
so creedlove.com is that it?
Creedlove.com. Yep.
Okay. Good.
Yep. And we used to serve families who are fighting the battle of childhood cancer.
Man, beautiful. Man, thank you for the time, my friend. And as soon as this thing breaks, let's get together.
Can't wait.
For sure.
Thank you, buddy.
Thanks for taking the time, my friend. And say hi to Stephanie, please, for me.
Yeah, I will. Love you, man. We'll see you.